All right. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the webinar, Optimize Outcomes with Decisions Powered by AI, hosted by Circuitry.ai with leading experts from the industry. My name is Rod Langor. I'm the Senior Account Executive here at Circuitry.ai, and I'm going to be the moderator for this webinar. I do want you to know that this webinar is being recorded, so the recording and the presentations will be made available for you after the webinar concludes. And just to keep you all informed, all attendees will be muted during the webinar. However, you can post questions anytime by using the question panel in the Zoom widget. And then, of course, at the end of the session, we'll have 15 minutes for our audience Q&A after the presentations are finished. A little bit here about Circuitry.ai. We provide, as mentioned, enterprise artificial intelligence as a service applications, robust decision intelligence platforms to analyze, augment, and automate decisions, which we will be sure to jump in here in just a moment. And I'm excited to introduce both of our presenters today. We have Dr. Lorien Pratt, a well-known author and inventor of decision intelligence, and Ashok Kartham, who is actually our founder and CEO of Circuitry.ai. And I'll be able to let them speak a little bit more in depth about themselves if they wish as the time goes. So we'll start off with this. What is decision intelligence? What kinds of decisions does it address? And why does decision intelligence and what benefits can companies expect? So I will hand this off. Who would like to take the first one? Would you like to start, Doctor?
Sure, absolutely. And thank you guys for attending this webinar. Really appreciate you investing your time in what we promise to be a session with a lot of value. So yeah, what is decision intelligence? Why are you here? Any new technology goes through a phase where it's goes from being technology focused to really understanding what the needs of the end users are who use that technology. So the first way I like to talk about what the value of decision intelligence is it's that bridge from the tech to the people who need to use the tech. AI is really popular right now, and there's so many organizations that are wondering, how can I use AI to drive my business? I don't want to be caught in catch-up mode. I want to be innovative. I want to get ahead. But connecting the AI to the business outcomes is a real challenge. They're not quite sure how to start, how to go about doing that. And so that's really what decision intelligence is all about. DI says we start by understanding our outcomes, and then we say, okay, if these are our business outcomes, what are the actions we could take to achieve those outcomes? And you'll notice with those two questions, we're not talking about data yet. We're not talking about AI yet. And that's very, very intentional. We're really turning things upside down with decision intelligence. We're saying we need to understand the business outcomes that the AI is supporting. And only once we understand that, do we then start to talk about integrating the human needs with the tech, but then multiple technologies together as well. So we're really integrating in two directions between different technologies. We're not just like the history of AI is sort of one tool at a time. And, oh, expert systems didn't solve all our problems, so let's throw them away and do another tool. Instead, we're integrating multiple tools with DI and then also integrating them better with those business needs.
Great, thank you. Would you care to add to that, Ashok?
Sure. As we said, hi, everyone. I'm glad you could join our webinar today. And it's great to be on panel with Dr. Pratt, who has invented the term decision intelligence. And I obviously fully agree with the definition of DI as connecting decisions to actions and then outcomes. That's why actually we like even representing the DI as a circuit that connects decision to actions or execution, and then the outcome or value that you can realize, and then decision intelligence as enabler to model, to augment, automate, and monitor decisions so you can realize better outcomes. That's informed by the right data, right knowledge, right predictions that support that. Okay? And as we talked about more on the what kind of decisions and all that, again, Dr. Pratt, I will let you share a little bit, start with that, and then I'll share some framework about what kind of decisions can be supported with DI.
Sure thing. You know, in the history of AI, the word decision is a little bit what we call overloaded, meaning we say the word decision and we could actually mean one of three very different things. So with me as a supervised learning, machine learning AI person, a decision is like a classification. This is a picture of a cat versus this is a picture of a dog. This is a security we expect will increase in value. This is a security we believe will decrease in value. We also do regression decisions. We predict the weather will, have a particular, the temperature tomorrow will be a particular number. So that's not a classification, it's prediction of a number in the future. And those decisions that are really fundamentally different than decisions to take an action that lead to an outcome. So when I'm deciding this is a picture of a cat, oh, the security will increase, it sort of leaves us wanting, okay, so what, right? What are we going to do with that classification or that prediction? So decision intelligence says humans, and actually my dog, think in terms of actions they take that lead to outcomes. And they sort of have a mental simulation model of how those actions lead to outcomes in the world. And it turns out in modern businesses, often that chain of events is quite complex. And that's a fundamentally different, we should almost invent a different word, Ashok, right? And we shouldn't call it a decision, we should call it something else. But unfortunately, the English language at least uses one word to mean two very different things. So in decision intelligence, we are often talking about these action to outcome decisions.
Sure. Then as we look at the decisions, again, businesses and people make billions of decisions every year. I kind of wanted to share a little bit of three frameworks that you can kind of categorize these decisions. And then hopefully this will help you to identify which decisions you need to focus on first to augment or automate using DI. So the first framework obviously is, where do you get the most value from? And matched against the feasibility of doing it. Again, the feasibility could be technological, it could be the availability of right data, or even the organization and the team being ready for it. So if you take a intersection of that value and the feasibility, which is a common framework that's used in decision intelligence, you obviously want to focus on high value, most feasible decisions first, while maybe realizing some quick wins where even though value is lower, that's something that you can quickly automate or augment to do this. Then the next framework is how frequent these decisions happen. That way, the more frequent they are, you have more data available, as well as you can realize better value. And other thing is, are these decisions operational or strategic? Again, DA can be applied to even one-off strategic decisions. And we think for you to realize efficiency at scale, you may be focusing on more frequent operational decisions. And again, this is something that each business have to make their own determination on which decision to focus on. And then finally, more focused on where is intelligence required. There can be a lot of decisions, could be simple, maybe a simple conditional if then else statement can suffice. You could have that like you are doing in a business rule system or a workflow to do it. But some places where there is a more complexity involved, you need the assistance of AI and other intelligent technologies to do it. And the other aspect is, where do you need to automate it? Some decisions could be people have to do because of the nature of the decisions, the risk involved, and the creativity and other aspects involved to do it. Again, we feel like the DI can help add more value when they could be intelligently automated. So if you look at all these three frameworks, in summary, you can look at high value, high feasible, frequent operational decisions can be used for intelligent automation. That's one way to pick like what decisions can be enhanced with DI. Right? Then maybe Pratt, you can also talk about the benefits of DI. I know that's one of the questions that was asking, which will help us to build on the ROI later.
Sure. Well, there's kind of two key ways to think about the benefits of decision intelligence. Number one is if we do that thing that I talked about earlier, where we don't start with the data, and instead we start with the outcomes that we're trying to achieve and the actions that we have available. And then only after that, we look at the data. Oh my goodness, it can take a giant, petabyte scale data set with thousands of fields And then what you realize is only a subset of that data has the greatest value. And I think often as data people, we make the mistake, because we don't understand how the data is going to be used, we think every field has the same value. Well, of course, that's not true. And just anecdotally, we find that about 10% of the data that an organization has 90% of the value for driving effective decisions. And so benefit number one is huge cost savings with data gathering, management, preparation, if you have this lens that sort of focuses you on a smaller subset of the data that has the greatest value. And then number two is just, so many organizations are being asked to be more evidence-based and more data-driven. Well, it's not just for fun, it's because we expect that's going to drive better business outcomes. And so DI gives you a path to be more evidence-based, more data-driven, and ultimately to make better choices in many realms, strategic and tactical, that drive business value.
Sure. And again, I completely agree. As we see the benefits of DI, number one, on the optimizing the outcomes. Those outcomes could be increasing sales, cost savings, or productivity gains. That's the most important benefit you could get out of DI. Then DI also can improve the quality, velocity, efficiency, and consistency of decisions. So you can scale organizations more effectively as you expand globally and you bring in new teams and new capabilities on board. Hopefully DI can help you to do that efficiently and effectively. Actually, recently I've been having a few conversations with a number of companies about DI. One thing that a number of them brought up, for example, is how they can ramp up new people quickly to the same level as experienced people using DI. That way, this experience gap that typically exists, I think DI can help to provide right access to the knowledge and help them make decisions at the same quality as a consistency level as the experienced people. So again, you can realize all the reusability of decisions as well as the consistency of decisions is something that you can derive a lot of benefits from. That, Rod?
Yes. And so now that we know what the benefits are, and actually you just gave a quick use case, maybe we can start to talk a little bit more how companies can actually apply that AI and machine learning to make those better decisions.
Go ahead, Ashok.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr.
So let's see. Well, the question here is how to apply AI. Oh, and how they fit in. Okay. So before we talked about those two kinds of decisions that we have, where there's the decisions that categorize or that are regression, and then those action to outcome decisions. Well, when we go to action and outcome decisions, those other kinds of decisions, we don't throw those away. Instead, they become part of the action to outcome choice. So remember earlier, I gave the example of, let's say we had a really great machine learning predictor of the value of some security that you're thinking of investing in, right? So if you have the prediction that that security is going to have a high value, that doesn't get you all the way, right? Because there also might be a cost of investment. There might be some other factors involved in investing in that company. And so the choice to take the action to make the investment sort of surrounds that prediction. And this is the pattern that we see. Decision intelligence uses AI predictions and AI classifications as components, and then combines multiple AI systems, sort of orchestrates them together in order to connect them to business outcomes and then back to actions.
Sure.
And I would like to jump in just real quick. We do have a question from one of the audience that I want to jump in really quick. And they wanted to ask, how does the DA help if the client is not sure about what the next step is?
Well, DI gives you a really nice sort of cookbook. First do this, then do that. And I'll give you a preview. We're going to say this later, but throw the technology out of the room for a minute. Just ask the client, what business outcomes do you think this system will achieve? And what I've found is every time I get in a room with a workshop with a client, there are as many business outcomes as there are people in the room. Like one wants EBITDA, net of OPEX after 12 months. Another wants EBITDA net of CapEx plus OPEX after 24 months. And so the first step is just let's make sure we're all on the same page as to how we're going to measure success and what that outcome is. So that's step one, and we'll save all the other steps for later in the presentation. But that's an absolutely excellent question. But you can do this today, right? Go home, go to work, ask somebody who's facing an important decision. Just start by aligning around what you're trying to achieve. You would be amazed. We just assume we're all on the same page. And we're not. We're off, especially in complex, fast-changing, volatile business environments. You'll be surprised to learn you assume everybody's on the same page, but you're not. So everybody's pulling in different directions.
Sure. I think one way to understand decision intelligence is to contrast it with recent digital transformation initiatives. Over the last 2 decades, we have gotten a lot better at generating, collecting data, storing it in the cloud, accessing it on any device, and in some cases, visualizing it to some extent. But these systems, some of them referred to as systems of record and systems of engagement, then expect people to make sense, decide and act on that data, which could be overwhelming as the data continues to grow exponentially. So the DI, or we call like a new systems of intelligence, are focused on making decisions that lead to actions, as we define. DI can augment people to make sense of the data so they can make better decisions or automate it. So if we look at, like, say, any of us, if we think about it, like if you have access to all the knowledge, required knowledge, if we could even predict the outcomes better, and then you have all the tools set to automate it, obviously we will all make better decisions. I think that's where AI can come in and help us, is that we could have easy access to knowledge from all the people or from across the board. It can also help predict the outcomes, even though with the probability on if we make certain choice, what could the outcome be? So it can be the outcomes can be evaluated more independently. And then if they could be automated, not only that there is a decision made, those actions can be executed, then you will realize the value of that decision quickly. So I think the AI can add value at each of these stages, make all of us like a better decision makers.
Yeah, and let me just double down on that. There's really 2 benefits, right? Efficiency and effectiveness, right? So we can do things faster, but we can also do things better.
All right. So can we, how about some use cases? What type of decisions can AI help optimize?
So AI or DI? Sorry.
AI.
Oh gosh. So many use cases. I think the classic AI use case is churn analysis. And in churn, we're trying to say, here's all this data we have all about our customers who might be like subscribers to your telecommunications service or people who have your SaaS product. How can you use all that data to predict which of your customers you might be at risk of losing, and then have some intervention to try to prevent that? So that's just one example, but there's hundreds. I've been doing these, so many, like there's healthcare and finance and manufacturing has so many great examples of where AI has value.
Absolutely. I think decision intelligence and with the augmentation of AI can help in number of use cases. I think as we talked about, DI can support, augment, or automate these decisions. You can take each of those capabilities, have a number of use cases, either it's starting with the product selection all the way to like dynamic pricing, inventory optimization, predictive maintenance, fraud detection, and number of these use cases. Again, I want to take like 2 use cases to kind of show the value, like a specific value for that. So one of the things is definitely our choice of products are increasing, right? Number of SKUs, whether you go to any retailer or in general, they've been increasing. Complexity and the features of the products are increasing too. So how can customers that are selecting the products, or the people, either salespeople or the channel retailers and others that are recommending these products, make sense of it? Again, we think that's where decision intelligence can help with guided selling or making the right choices about the products, not through searches and things like that, but more being able to answer questions about the products, understand the customer needs better, and then recommend the right products to do it. we have seen this, even though it's not called decision intelligence, more in making choices about entertainment, whether it's YouTube or a streaming channels and do it. But that same can be applied now across the board, not just at a big tech companies or retailers to do it, that every manufacturer, every company can help the customers, can assist the customer as an advisor that's always available, provide the right recommendations, which will result in growth, sales growth, as well as a higher customer conversion for companies. And same can be extended to the support or service side. When you are trying to make decisions about what repair need to be done, what parts are needed, or how to resolve any issue even in a non-product marketplace, you could have, I think, a number of companies are using this to provide either support, Q&A, diagnostic, repair recommendations in the same fashion as product advisor. Here, the knowledge could be different, the actions and the recommendations could be different, but the decision intelligence can support the same way and then improve the outcomes in resolution times or productivity of the people in providing these services. Another, I think, similar example in manufacturing too is if we look at the quality of the products. Again, the failures are captured in a number of data sources. It could be the warranty data, support data, inspections, returns, repair orders, IoT in terms of connected products. To make sense of all of this data, I think you need a good decision intelligence. I know even though it's showing a little bit more as an architecture, how do you make sense of it so you can reduce the detection to correction cycle? So there are less defective products, and these are being corrected faster. People know what are the emerging issues are, so they could address them. So again, these are just a few of the examples where decision intelligence can help make sense of this explosion of the data, provide the more relevant and right recommendations so you can take actions associated with that. Todd?
Perfect. What role does the generative AI play in decision intelligence? Can we expand on that a little bit?
Sure, I can speak to that real quick. You know, I was on the internet before the 1990s, just nobody used computers before then. And then we had this new user interface, which was the browser, the visual browser where you could get on a website. There was a whole bunch, like decades, where we used computers before we had that. And then we had this new user interface. And then, you know, obviously at that point, the World Wide Web, the information superhighway exploded. Well, we're seeing that same dynamic happen with generative AI. So AI is a 50-year-old field. We've had, you know, related data science, data analytics, but it has not had a user interface that's been a standard that sits on top of all that tech. You know, you might think there's the driver's seat and then there's the under the hood stuff. And we've been developing all this under the hood stuff and sort of developing these driver's seats, you know, as a one-off. And so what's really exciting about generative AI in general is that it is this bridge that's unlocking the power of AI, and not just generative AI, but all the traditional kinds of AI that have been around for half a century. It's unlocking all this power that nerds like me have been building for many, many decades. And so generally speaking, that's what's so exciting to me about Gen AI and LLMs in particular. For decision making, it's funny, lots of people think of LLMs as an efficiency improver, like they help you create content faster. There's actually other completely different categories of use cases. So for making decisions, number one, Gen AI is really good as you're trying to think through what are all the outcomes that we might want to achieve as a business. It helps you brainstorm through those, because sometimes, you know, it's not really obvious. Earlier I said, you know, EBITDA net of OpEx. Well, maybe you also have some environmental or some sustainability or some social outcomes that you care about. And maybe there's some unintended consequences that could be an outcome that you don't really like. So Gen AI is really good at helping with that brainstorming process as you think through your outcomes, as you think through your actions, and then you think through your chain of events that gets you from the actions to the outcomes within the context of some external factors that you can't control. So it really helps you as an assistant. And it's not always right. We all know that Gen AI isn't always right, but it's a great assistant to help you sort of structure how all those pieces fit together. That's number one. Then number two, what's really cool is now you can talk to a Gen AI and you can say, help me make a decision about what I should do with my process improvement in my service line, right? And it can, we all know that Gen AI isn't perfect, that it hallucinates, it makes mistakes. One of the key things it doesn't do is what we call chain of thought causal reasoning, where it goes from actions to outcomes. Well, we can get the Gen AI to invoke the decision intelligence action to outcome thing. So now we have the best of both worlds, right? We have a DI model that helps us simulate all the actions we might take to find the best combination of choices that lead to some outcomes. But then it's not just locked away in some piece of code that's really hard to reach. We have a conversational interface on the front of that that can access that as needed. So that's retrieval augmented, reasoning augmented generation, right? So it's not just about retrieving text, which is what a lot of LLMs and Gen AI do, but retrieving these active agents that help us to do some reasoning, which is really exciting.
Very well.
As you said, Pratt, I think it's been amazing what Gen AI can do. I think we all found out over the last year the progress and the human level of generation for either text or, I mean, increasingly more audio and video type output. Again, we think Gen AI has a critical role, as you identified, critical role to play within DI. I think if we take the overall decision framework that we referenced before, at least there are 4 areas, as you touched on a couple of those already. Number one, we could have now a conversational experience with the systems. I think some of them have declared conversation is becoming the new user experience in stuff, the forms and the things like that. People can interact with the systems in a natural way using the natural language, which is that understanding is powered by the LLMs. That way, any decisions that you are trying to make, you could have a simple way to question the system about the decision. Second is LLMs are helping providing more semantic understanding of the knowledge and the data. And we touched upon the RAG, how you can augment some of the decisions with right and relevant knowledge so they can inform the decisions to do this. Number 3, they said, even when we take the explanation of the decision, this we find it more interesting, even though this is an emerging area, that you could leverage the Gen AI and LLMs to explain the decisions better, the reasoning behind it, and how it arrived at that decision so the humans can trust the system to do it. And then finally, as you are monitoring the outcomes, again, you could have a natural language queries against the data to realize like where the outcomes are, or you can even get the summary of the feedback, summary of the conversations and things like that. So we think if we take that decision circuit, as we talked about decisions linking to actions and outcomes, there are different areas where Gen AI can add value. Having said that, one thing is Gen AI today, as you said, generates human level text, audio, and video, but it cannot generate decisions. I do think the future of decision intelligence is to generate those decisions as humans do by leveraging not only Gen AI, but also all the other technologies of AI that we will learn more about, right? Because sometimes when we look at, because of the hype of Gen AI, everyone thinks Gen AI is sufficient or that can help you to make all the decisions. It can definitely help you in a number of ways, but I think we do need to apply other techniques and algorithms to support the decisions that you need to make in a business.
So what are some of the success factors to implement the DI?
I'll start out with one of them and then I'll throw it over to you, Ashok. I think I'm just going to repeat what I said earlier, because so many organizations, especially if they've hired like PhD AI people or smart data scientists, they start with the data instead of starting with the business outcomes. So success factor number 1, and you'll have to fight this battle a lot, is make sure you really understand how things are done today, how you measure how things are done today, and how you're going to measure whether your new system is actually better than what's done today. So understanding your baseline is also very important. Keeping the data out of the room until you have your business case is very important. And then once you understand all of that, then going to the data and the technology as a second step. It's probably the biggest sort of classic mistake / success factor if you can fix it.
Sure. I think I kind of want to list a few factors here, and then we'll take probably a case study to see what we can learn from that. First, I think having the right use cases. As we identified, even though because of the hype, looks like we can solve all the problems using this, do want to pick the right use cases with the high business value and the feasibility. And two, I think, again, there are industry studies show a good portion, even 85% of the AI projects fail. And the reason is either it's the availability of data and also the huge upfront investment that may be required. So we do think, again, even if it's having an enterprise AI as a service model will help you reduce the risk and the time involved in doing these projects. That could be a good success factor, as we have seen with SaaS software over the last decade. And then also having a phased approach that also integrates well with the existing process. So this is seen as a systems of intelligence augmenting your workflows, could help you to be able to succeed better, and then have a model to continuously optimize it over time. It's not you implement and done with it. I think especially with any AI systems and decision intelligence too, you need to continuously monitor and optimize the decisions that you are doing. I think if we take recently, there was a report, I think a week ago or so, that Apple dropped its car project. And then there were lots of reports came about analyzing it. I think one of the factors that was mentioned too is initially there was a too ambitious goal to have a fully autonomous car that doesn't have a steering wheel, doesn't have front-facing seats, so it could be a fully autonomous car. And I think actually that's a challenging goal to do it, even for the most valuable company, probably the brightest minds and with billions of dollars of investment. So after different iterations, they ended up dropping the project. But if in contrast, Tesla started introducing the autonomous car years ago, and then has been continuously improving over time towards the full self-service, self-drive. Even if it has taken a little bit longer, a few more years than initially expected, but we see that progress, and both the company as well as the drivers are able to realize the value. Not all of us will do these billions of dollar projects, but there are some lessons learned in terms of how you select, what you set as a phased approach, how you can start small, but be able to continuously improve it so you can get towards that fully autonomous business.
Anything else to add?
No, I think, I know as we said, in general, if we look at, again, quickly cover a couple of aspects. When we look at the decision intelligence, actually, I see this as a bridge between the existing systems, systems of record or systems of engagement, and all the AI capabilities. I think all of us don't have to reinvent some of the foundation models. That's one of the great things with the LLMs too, is we could use those foundation models, be able to train on a company-specific data. We could take a lot of the open source innovation that's happening in this industry, be able to build on that. So the decision intelligence as a platform or specific use cases can stand upon all these AI capabilities, and then also be integrate with the enterprise systems. I think that model of connecting these two could lead to a better success. And then as we talked about, having this model of where it makes sense to analyze, like have the human make the decision, or augment it, where machine recommends and then human accepts or rejects those decisions, and then in the future being able to fully automate it. Having the model, and then incrementally as you build the trust and the confidence, the right data is available, right algorithms available, you can kind of evolve the decision intelligence to be successful.
Perfect. So yeah, so now that we know, the augment, the automate, but how do we actually calculate and get the realization of the ROI from the DI?
I think we touched on this already, so I'll just speak to it real quick. Number one, massive savings in your data costs. So many people say, the decision is only as good as the data, and that's really misleading. The decision is only as good as the data that's actually predictive and that matters, right? I mean, my decision as to how to drive across town does not depend on data about exactly which cloud is above me or how many people are in a grocery store. And unless you understand that decision, you won't know which data is relevant and which isn't. And so, really, really look at this lens of the actions and the outcomes to decide which data you need. And then, focus on at the beginning on the intangible value. People make 10,000 decisions a day, right? So simply having just a paper map, which you can build today, of your actions and your outcomes that guides how your team is operating can have an immediate low-hanging fruit value. And then, of course, AI and machine learning have massive competitive advantage. I don't think, today we wouldn't think of having a company that didn't have a website. I think 5 years from now, we will not think of any company being competitively successful unless it leverages AI effectively. And DI is your bridge to that AI.
Thank you. Again, I think we touched upon some of the benefits of decision intelligence before, and the ROI can be, again, at a high level, could be looked at 4 main areas. One, how can it result in increased revenue? Which could be from enhanced marketing, product discovery, conversion rates, or even a cross-sell and upsell, how DI can assist in those processes. You can have a tangible percentage of increase and measure that in terms of increased revenue. Other is cost savings. The cost savings from optimized operations, reduced inventory, or improving the supply chain efficiency type of decisions that are involved. Again, this could be very tangible value in terms of you seeing an immediate cost savings to do that. And then we touch upon the improved efficiency or productivity. These are the time savings for the people that are involved in making these decisions, how I can accelerate it, improve the velocity of that. Other things, I do want to look at the risk mitigation. A lot of cases, there is a risk involved, either it's the fraud related or the risk involved with the decisions, either it's an insurance side of it or even a product quality, as we discussed. All of this could be improved. You can reduce the risk of, for example, in the product quality example, risk of recalls, if we could fix that issue faster using the predictive analytics and the improved decision making to do this. And then I think, Dr. Pratt, as you touched upon it, we cannot ignore the qualitative benefits that can come from better insights, better employee satisfaction. Again, one example I will share as we have discussions with the customers too. Today, most of the companies have probably numerous meetings about making decisions, just to share information with each other, discuss the alternatives to do it. So if with the DI, we could have a fewer meetings, people felt that's an immediate productivity improvement. People would like that. Similarly, if employees are currently making a lot of routine decisions, that may not give them satisfaction in the job to do it. But if DI can take that, they are being more creative. Again, these are tangible benefits in terms of employee satisfaction, having less meetings and things like that. We cannot underestimate those. So you could take all of these benefits together. And if you compare to the cost of decision intelligence, I do think there is a significant value that companies can realize. So this is more, decision intelligence is applied AI with immediate returns. It's not just about technology or theoretical, but I strongly believe there is a good ROI companies can realize.
Very well. So I guess the big question is, we know what the benefits are, but how do we get started?
So this is the one I previewed a little bit earlier. And you can do this today. So your homework, if you stuck with us this long, it's probably worth you taking a few minutes when you're done with this webinar, just to, talk to your spouse, talk to your manager, think of a decision that's a little complex, that's, maybe in a rapidly changing environment that might be pretty costly to you. Like, should you send your kid to which college? Where should you acquire a new company? Where should you launch your product? Which markets are you going to open up? There are some big decisions that organizations face that we find across the board could be made better if they were evidence-based and data-driven. As we talked about earlier, brainstorm about the outcomes. You might even log into ChatGPT, use an LLM to give you some thoughts. Say, hey, I'm making this decision. What are the various outcomes of this decision that I might not be thinking of? What are the unintended consequences? Because that's often what hangs us up in a complex world. But don't talk about whether they're good outcomes or not. By brainstorm, I mean even stupid or funny outcomes are good at this stage because that gets the creative juices flowing. Then do the same thing with actions. And this is where the discipline comes in. Don't go down the rabbit hole of saying, is this a good choice? Is this a good step we should take? Brainstorm and be creative, because the creative part of your brain is over here and the analytical part is somewhere else. And so you want all the blood in that. What are all the choices we can make? Because I so often see sort of tunnel vision. People have always made the same actions, always taken the same steps. And so they're not open to the breadth of choices that they could make. And so going through an explicit brainstorm session where they're not allowed to assess the validity of each action separate from that analytical phase is really good. Think about what you can measure and then wire them all up. And dihandbook.com is my recent book that landed last year that'll take you through that in detail. But you don't need to buy the book. You can do this right now, just with what's on this slide today. And even that, we've had one organization that went through this process in a fairly structured and formal way. And just this process alone can be worth tens of millions of dollars for certain use cases.
Sure. No, thank you, Dr. Pratt. Actually, I really like the causal decision diagram you have as a blueprint to make better decisions. I think that will be very valuable for companies as they are looking at improving their decisions. Again, from a systems or a software perspective, quickly want to identify a few steps on how companies can get started on DI. As we already discussed, I think identifying the right use cases for your company based on the frameworks that we talked about, I think that will help a lot. And then if you could model those decisions to identify what factors influence, what data and knowledge are required. Again, focusing on that required data and knowledge is important too. I think a lot of companies in the past have done these data lake, data warehouse, large projects, multi-year projects to do it. They may not realize the value, but the 10% of the data that's required for these decisions, I think if you can identify, have the data available, I think that's another good way to get started with the decision intelligence to do it. I do think having the right platform or even the solution that focuses on your use cases is important too. I think these days there is no need to start from scratch. We do think a number of companies are innovating to provide vertical practical solutions for your industry, your domain, and use cases to do it. I think, again, that can help you to be able to get started without a huge upfront investment to do that. And then once you do that, do think having a POC or a pilot to get started, because there are generally some apprehension about decision intelligence or AI to do it, proving it in a POC or pilot, and then have a roadmap to roll it out or expand the user base and use cases, I think will give you a good roadmap to continue to expand AI.
Very well, very well. And I know we have some questions out there, but just hold tight. We'll get to those questions here just as soon as we can get through the presentation. So just keep that in mind. I do see those here. But what's up next, right? So companies have, the decision logic embedded in their current systems. How can they apply the AI, to these applications that they already have?
Sure. Maybe I can start with this aspect of it. Is, as we talked about, if you look at here, the bottom layer is showing a typical business process today with the systems. You have certain transactions that are probably have some business rules in as if then else conditions or decision tables, work with the workflow management side, store the data, and then maybe use a BI tool to generate reports to do that. Right? I think all of you are familiar with this standard process. We think if we look at the adding like the decision intelligence layer to the standard business process, I think the business rules can be replaced with where DI can help with the real-time decisions, where you are deriving, like, for example, you could look at all the historic data, or if you need to augment with the right knowledge at the time of the decision, this could be either through the API or presenting to the users. I think the right real-time decision data will help. Same way, if you take the workflow, a lot of these are, you had to previously code it, or even if you're using visual tools, have to say ahead of time what the workflow would be. I think having a right decision intelligence models can help augment and automate it without you having to explicitly develop it. And then if we take the operational data, if we could convert into more like a data lake house where predictive models predictions can come out of it. I think it can augment the intelligence layer. So if we take the current process, you could kind of augment again at different stages to say how you can make real-time decisions, provide more predictive models, so it will result in optimal outcomes to do it. So I think hopefully this helps to see the parallel between existing applications and process to more systems of intelligence.
And let me add to this. I think there's an important distinction that deserves sort of reiterating, that we can have fully automated decisions, like you might see, Google's decision to show you an ad. There's no human at Google who says, Ashok should see this particular content or this particular ad. And we can also have augmented decisions, which means there is a human in the loop. And this is what we traditionally have used like dashboards for, and sometimes an Excel spreadsheet. And this same framework works in both of those scenarios. In both cases, it's important to know which business outcome your system is supposed to help you with and which action you're supposed to take. And historically, these have been quite separate. Decision support, business intelligence, dashboard, those kinds of tools have really been for the human in the loop decisions. And AI really grew up around fully automated decisions. And what we're saying here is that all that AI tech that has historically only been for fully automated ones can be used in this new human in the loop decision augmentation, and vice versa. So we really have, what we're trying to do is defragment the market, because there's so many people doing so many different things. And what's wonderful about, what's going on here with circuitry is we're integrating databases, workflows, rules, traditional AI, optimization, simulation, all of these technologies in a way so that we're not just looking at just one tech at a time, but we're integrating them in a way that we're making the maximum leverage out of modern advanced tech.
Thank you.
And so we've learned this excellent technology, right? All the great use cases, all of the benefits. What about if we take a look at the other side of that? What are the risks associated with DI, and how can companies mitigate these risks?
I'll let you take that one, Ashok.
Sure, definitely. I know there are today, especially because of all the discussion going on from existential threat from AI to job loss and all that, we are not addressing those aspects of it. I want to focus on, overall, I'm very optimistic about the value decision intelligence or in general AI can add to it. I think it can help solve a number of problems in the world with the help of DI and AI for companies as well as for the world, from sustainability to a number of other problems that we all face. But when it comes to more decision intelligence implementation, like I said, sometimes you could pick the wrong use cases. Again, hopefully, if you use the right framework, you can pick the right use cases. There are some challenges with the technologies as they are evolving and having like a shortage of skills. Again, we feel like focusing on specific use cases, leveraging the existing innovation from the companies would help there. And to get the stakeholder buy-in, because there are a lot of apprehension about ability of the AI to help with it or DI to help with it. I think in one of the studies, when the managers were surveyed, most of them said their subordinate decisions can be automated 70%, but only 10% of their decisions can be automated. So everyone feels that way, that what they do is unique, but the other things can be automated. But it requires to be able to, over time, get the buy-in, start small, be able to show this. And then the data always is a huge risk for the DI, dealing with the siloed data. Again, we already touched upon it. Focusing on that 10% of the data that can support the decisions, I think will help make DI more successful. There are always like issues of data privacy bias. I think we have seen a number of examples, including the latest one with Gemini to do it. Even though within DI, because it's based on your data, companies do need to be aware of this, plan for it, and hopefully continue to monitor and make sure the data privacy is protected in the enterprise systems to do that. So there are a number of risks. I think these risks are manageable, and companies can, like we have done with other digital transformation initiatives, can benefit from the DI while mitigating the risks. Right?
And surely, last but not least, how can companies really monitor these decisions to, continue to optimize all of these outcomes? What kind of metrics are there? really to assess what the effectiveness is.
So I'll jump in on this one briefly. And again, I think it's important to make yet another distinction between repeated decisions, the kind of choice where you might make the same choice, 10 times a day, like an insurance company maybe underwriting something, or a manufacturing company trying to decide, what its production is on a daily basis, and more occasional decisions that you don't do 100 times a day. If you have the 100 times a day decision and you have a way of measuring were you right or not, you can create a measurement between what your system said you should do and then what the right choice would have been, and sort of measure that difference and use some statistics to add it up. So there's really easy, and machine learning and statistics both are pretty good at telling you how to measure the accuracy of your decision system. If it's an occasional decision, it's a little harder, right? And so we have to fall back on, did we use a good decision-making process? Did we use all the data that we had available? And we can audit against using good processes and using good decision-making structures. And because we don't know what that quote ground truth is, we don't know if we were right or not. There's a counterfactual. What would have happened if we'd made a different decision? And we have to use simulation sometimes to model those differences. And, as this slide says, sometimes you make the best decision possible with all the data you have available, and it still doesn't come out right. That doesn't mean your decision was bad. It meant that reality was, your model is not a perfect match to reality, and it's impossible to predict the future, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and you did your best choice within the realm of what you knew. Sometimes you get lucky on the upside too. Sometimes you can not use good data and flip a coin and still do a good job. And I'll leave it at that and throw it over to you, Ashok, for the rest of it.
Sure. Again, for the time's sake, I will touch upon a couple of aspects. When it comes to monitoring of the decisions and improving, there are two traditional methods. One is you could have certain metrics, key metrics set up for your outcomes. What are you expecting? For example, what are the benefits, increase in sales or cost savings you are expecting, and measure the DI value against that. Other is you are continuously capturing the feedback from the users on how DI helped when you are augmenting or sharing the knowledge, those aspects, and that feedback can be used to fine-tune the models and improve the outcomes for that. And then, but in AI, there is also other side of it is you could actually leverage the AI itself, want to do some automated analysis. Because if you set the outcomes, system can evaluate whether those outcomes are achieved if the data is available after the execution of the decisions, and then can adjust for the discrepancies. That's part of the every AI model is how do you continue to optimize that? Or you could leverage the optimization algorithms to help support that. And then, so this continuous learning that can be set up and the optimization could be a significant benefit in DI. So you have the right monitoring system set up using the DI itself, or what we call as a decision orchestration. That, Todd?
So I guess we can turn over some Q&A. It looks like most of the ones that were earlier in the chat have been answered. I didn't know if we wanted to go through them again, simply so the rest of the audience can listen or understand. But one of the questions was, there are so many gaps in data for most of the companies. How does the DI work when there are gaps in the data or the data management is not mature enough?
So since I typed the answer here, I'll speak to it a little bit. Great question, Callian. And again, I think it's really important when we are data scientists, when we're gathering or preparing data, to realize, Lorien's third distinction of the webinar, the difference between operational data management and statistical data management or analytical data management. So operational data management is what you might do at a bank. We do not want my bank account to think that I have $3 and it says I only have $2. So every bit matters, and we have to be completely accurate, right? And that's operational data management. Analytical or statistical data management says you can have very messy data and you can still make good decisions. So like if I'm trying to predict who's going to win an election, I can interview not everybody. I don't have to understand everybody's planned vote. I can get a subset and I can use statistics to usually make a pretty good prediction as to who's going to win. That's why we have polling, right? And voting is like operational. We don't ever want to miss anybody's vote. That needs to be accurate. When we're trying to make good decisions, the data can be messy. It can be more of that statistical or analytical bar for data quality. So where the data quality bar might be really high for your bank account or your medical record, when you're trying to understand, how this, how your actions might lead to your outcomes, the data quality bar is actually a little bit lower. And so DI gives you, and AI and any statistical method gives you a way of, if the signal is bigger than the noise, of still tolerating a certain amount of noise in the data. So that's kind of thing number one. Thing number two is the thing I've said like 5 times, which is that the DI gives you the action to outcome lens. So there's some data sets that are irrelevant. Again, how many people are in the grocery store as I'm, on the corner as I'm trying to decide where to drive my car? Well, that's irrelevant to that decision. And so really understanding our decisions will let us know which data is irrelevant. So if the irrelevant data is messy, who cares? So that's my quick answer to that question. Excellent question from Callie, and we can talk for hours about that. But there's really a huge benefit here when we start to look at DI.
Sure. I think, again, I know you answered it well, Dr. Pratt, not much to add, but again, want to say is today when people are making decisions, again, they don't have the full information or the data. They are making decision to do it. When DI is augmenting it, it definitely needs better data, better quality data to have the right models. At the same time, you could still significantly add value by leveraging what is available, how you make it accessible for people at the right decision point. I think if you get started with this, as people see the value, and also these systems now can get better at capturing the right data. And I know there are a lot of companies investing in labeling the data and all that. With the DI, you are applying different techniques, different methodologies that are relevant for it. So depending on your situation, you can apply like a different algorithms or models to get started.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll just underline, you're absolutely right, Ashok, about that. I've never built a decision model, and I've built many dozens of them, that there was data for every piece of the decision model. Many times, as you start to map, how does this action lead to this thing, lead to this thing, lead to this outcome, you realize there's no data set to populate that link. Instead, there's a human I can interview, or a medical trial, like a randomized controlled trial, or a research document, right? And so what decision intelligence lets us do is sometimes entire linkages are missing along the way from actions to outcomes. And DI, as you correctly said, I just wanted to really emphasize this strongly, gives you the best of both worlds. When the data is missing or messy, you have this ability to pull in human intelligence or intelligence from text documents or all these other, qualitative unstructured sources in order to supplement what would be, more quantitative traditional data analysis.
So we're running a little bit short on time here. So one last question. Why don't we wrap it up with, where do you see decision intelligence changing within the next few years, or where do you see it headed?
Well, I'll kick that off and I'll let Ashok finish. I started off by saying that technologies, not just DI, but lots of other fields, go through a certain maturity cycle. They start being very technology focused, but the Wright brothers who invented the airplane did not start an airline, right? Different skill sets. DI is about that airline. It's about situating that new tech, the airplane, within business value and ultimately customer value. So I think DI will define the remainder of the 21st century for AI, data science, as it matures to being focused on customer needs and not just one tool at a time, but integrating multiple tools together.
That's great. I agree with that. I think maybe I will share just quickly 3 aspects of it. First, as I said, we are definitely heading towards increasing levels of automation. Right, that goes, and I think decision intelligence will play a significant role towards that fully autonomous business process by making the intelligent automation possible. Number 2, DI everywhere, which I think, even I think early in the year, people talked about not only AI in the cloud or decisions being done in the cloud, but edge AI, meaning now I think in the very near future, we'll have all of our phones, whether it's iPhones and other things, or other even products, connected products, will have enough power at the edge to make some decisions there, process data and things like that. So again, we think decision intelligence, the ability to make decisions, could go to that edge or to the field where the decision needs to be made, not just at the cloud level to do it. And then we kind of touched upon it before, similar to Gen AI, which is getting a lot better at generating text, audio, and video. Our vision is how decision intelligence can help you generate better decisions in the future, leveraging your internal data and also leveraging multiple technologies, as we call like as a composite AI anyway. With the time sake, I think they're very excited about the future of the AI and what it can do for all of us.
Perfect.
John?
Well, I think that about wraps it up. Although I do believe, do we have some book winners today? Okay, perfect. So congratulations to the following. You actually won a free digital version of the Decision Intelligence Handbook by our one and only Dr. Lorien Pratt. You guys are all winners there. I'd like to thank our presenters today, both you, Ashok, and you, Doctor. Hope that everybody got some value today. We are going to send out, like we said, the webinar to everybody, and we'll feel free to any emails and details, and we'll get the links to the recorders, and you can add any other questions for us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your time, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Bye-bye.